When you think of the Victorian era, what comes to mind? Probably a lot of stern faces, stiff upper lips, maybe a bit stuffy, right? But what if I told you that's only half the picture? Yeah, let's dive into this incredible era of contradiction. Okay, so take a look at this. This room from Sambourne House in London. I mean, it is just packed. It's ornate, almost a little overwhelming, isn't it? And you know what? This is the perfect metaphor for the Victorian Age itself, an era that was just overflowing with progress and wealth and confidence, but at the same time, crammed to the gills with massive social problems, poverty and unrest. It was anything but simple, that's for sure. So, with all that turbulence, all that change happening so fast, what was the anchor? What held it all together? Well, for a lot of people, the answer was just one person. Let's dig into how a single monarch came to define this entire chaotic age. And here she is, Queen Victoria. Can you believe she became queen at just 18 years old? 18! She was apparently graceful and super self-assured, and boy, she was gonna need it. Her reign would go on to become the longest in British history up to that point, and that provided this incredible sense of stability and continuity through decades of just breathtaking change. And what about this number? 9. What's that about? Well, that is how many children Queen Victoria had with her husband, Prince Albert. And their family life? It basically became the gold standard for the whole country. They presented this model of modesty and respectability that everyone looked up to. This picture-perfect family was like the calm center of a rapidly spinning world. Okay, so that stability at home, that solid foundation, it gave the nation the confidence to expand across the entire globe. So let's shift gears and look at the massive global reach of Great Britain during this time. I'm sure you've heard this phrase before, right? The sun never sets on England. It sounds kind of poetic, maybe a bit of a boast. But during this period, it wasn't a boast at all. It was literally true. A powerful, simple summary of just how huge the British Empire had become. I mean, just look at this 19th century map. Look at the sheer amount of territory under British control. It's staggering. It spanned every single continent. From North America to Australia, Africa to Asia, Britain's influence was, no joke, truly global. And to put that into perspective, we're talking about vast, diverse places like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong, Singapore, South Africa, Kenya, and of course, India. This wasn't just an empire, it was a massive, worldwide network of power and trade. So how did this whole global machine actually work? Well, it was powered by a pretty simple but incredibly effective economic engine. See, Britain would import raw materials from its colonies, things like cotton and silk, and then it would export finished, manufactured goods back out to countries all around the world. Simple, but powerful. And the result of all this? By the middle of the 1800s, Great Britain was the largest exporter and importer of goods on the entire planet. It was, simply put, the wealthiest country in the world. And this massive engine of global trade didn't just fuel the empire's expansion, it was also what powered the Industrial Revolution right back home. Now, you can't have that much power without a powerful ideology to go with it. And as our source material points out, there was this core belief that it was Britain's duty to bring its values, its laws, and its religion to what they called these savage races around the world. This idea was the justification that propped up so much of the colonial project. But this is where we get to the central contradiction. While Britain was projecting this image of power and civility all over the world, what was actually happening back at home? Well, the Victorians had to confront some massive problems right on their own doorstep. Remember just a minute ago we were talking about Britain being the wealthiest country in the world? Well, get this. In 1834, the government established a national system of workhouses. These were institutions where the poorest people were forced to labor in really harsh conditions just for some food and a roof over their head. I mean, the contrast is just staggering, isn't it? Unimaginable national wealth right alongside brutal, grinding poverty. Now, this massive contradiction wasn't totally ignored. The era actually saw a whole series of major reforms trying to tackle these social problems. You had the first Reform Act in 1832, giving the vote to middle-class men. A year later, the Factory Act started to regulate child labor, and you see this pattern continue right through the century. The Second Reform Act in 67 gave the vote to skilled working men. Unions were legalized in 71, and then the Third Reform Act in 84 gave the vote to all male householders. So they were clearly trying to fix things. But for all that reforming zeal, there was a huge, glaring, unanswered question. What was the one major challenge that this so-called Age of Reform completely failed to address? And here it is. The answer is pretty simple. All of those reform acts we just talked about, 1832, 1867, 1884, they all had one crucial thing in common. The vote was only for men. Yep, half the population was completely left out of this march of progress. And that massive omission, it gave rise to a new and incredibly powerful movement, all wrapped up in this one word: suffragettes. The fight for women's right to vote would become one of the defining struggles that grew right out of the Victorian era and then just exploded into the 20th century. So we're left with this really complex legacy, aren't we? An era of incredible progress and global power, but also one of deep-seated poverty and protest. An age of reform that somehow left a fundamental inequality completely unresolved. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How do all those contradictions from the Victorian age still echo in our world today?